Alright, here we are about to make a proof sheet from our page of Holga negatives, which are in the plastic sleeve. And they will remain in the plastic sleeve throughout this proofing process. Alright, the first thing you want to do is turn the enlarger on. We're on the black Ilford multi-grade enlarger in the corner of the darkroom. When you turn on the power pack, it's going to come up at a number 2 grade, which is kind of a flat average contrast, and it'll be at 5 seconds. We want 3 seconds, so we're going to do 2 minuses on there, put it at 3. Alright, now we're going to hit the focus on the enlarger and make sure we have a circle of light that covers the entire proof sheet. So if it doesn't, the focus knob is on the right, and you can change the angle of the light by focusing. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is make a test strip. I'm going to turn off the focus and get out a sheet of paper out of the paper safe marked 8x10 RC. And there's a partial piece of paper on the top here anyway. And we're just going to cut about half this off with the paper cutter. The paper has 2 sides, a glossy side. You can see it reflecting there. That's the side that you always keep up. That's the emulsion side. And so we're going to lop off about half this scrap of paper, put the other half back in the paper safe, go over to the enlarger, and the piece of paper goes down first, glossy side up, and the negatives go over the top. You want to position it so you get a couple strips of negatives registering on that little strip. And close down the glass. The glass pushes the negatives against the paper so they have good contact. Now what you're going to do is just hit the expose button on the timer and just give the whole thing 3 seconds of exposure. Next we'll cover about 1/8 of that little strip and then hit it again. So the covered part received 3 seconds of exposure. Now the rest of the whole thing will get 6. Move it another 1/8, hit it again. So now we have a 3 second and a 6 second. Move it again, hit it again, until you get up to 24 seconds. So what you're doing here is making a series of exposures that goes from 3 to 24 seconds, and from that we'll determine what the correct exposure for the proof sheet should be. Okay, now we're removing the piece of paper and we're going to take it over to the chemicals and process it. Alright, here we are in front of the darkroom sink. We take our piece of paper and we're going to slip it into the far left tray, which is where we set up the developer, and you slip it into the tray so it gets fully immersed immediately. Then set the timer at 1 minute. Vigorously agitate the tray so the chemistry keeps moving over the paper, and then use the tongs to keep it submerged because sometimes the paper likes to float. And what's happening here is we did a latent chemical reaction when we exposed this paper to light, and now we complete that reaction with the developing agent. And after 1 minute, you take your strip, remove your strip from this tray with the tong, which can be a little tricky at first until you get used to using it. And you lift it up and let it drip off. Then go into the water bath, which is the black tray in the middle. And that is a 10 to 20 second process. And that's the stop the development and rinse the developer off the strip before we put it in the final bath, which is the fixer, which is the second last tray here, the one before the wash. And this is also a 1 minute process. You always keep the tongs with the tray, so those were the tongs for the rinse bath. They're not wanting to stay in the tray apparently. And there's a separate set of tongs to use in the fixer. And again, agitate fairly vigorously. And this is actually removing the undarkened silver haloids. You can't see it so much in the safe light, but the highlights actually become brighter in the fixer. Because this is a test strip, after it's done fixed, we'll just briefly rinse it off in the water bath, and then we're going to look at it out in the bright light and determine what our exposure should be for our entire proof sheet. So just kind of rinse it off in the flowing water and then put it into a tray, and we're going to take it out into the light. So here we are out in the outer darkroom examining this in the white light. You'd never know in infrared. So here at 3 seconds exposure, we just have kind of a ghosty image of the negatives. 6 seconds, we're starting to see more detail, but we don't really have any blacks. 9 seconds, we're getting close. 12 seconds, looks pretty good. There's a full range of tones throughout most of these negatives. 15 seconds, also acceptable exposure. 18, our skin tones and our snows looking kind of gray. So 15 and 12 both look good. So we're going to try like 14 seconds on this proof sheet is kind of an in-between time. Alright, so we determined that 14 seconds was the best exposure for this proof sheet. So we're going to go to the timer and do a plus 10 seconds and a minus 1 to set it at 14. Now we're going to take an entire sheet out of the paper safe marked 8x10 RC. Put a glossy side up on the bottom of the proofing, and then negatives go directly on top, and then the glass comes down. And that's to make sure you have firm contact. You want to make sure you get your negatives centered on the sheet of paper so nothing's cut off. Now we'll just hit the expose, and the entire sheet will get the 14 seconds. Sometimes your negatives won't be entirely consistent. You might need to make 2 proof sheets at 2 different times to make sure you can see all the negatives. Alright, now we take this piece of paper out of here, bring it over to the chemicals again, and do the exact same procedure, except this time with an entire sheet of paper. So here again, get it in the chemicals. Make sure that the print is fully submerged. And set the timer at 1 minute. Give it plenty of agitation. Make sure it doesn't float. The fluid needs to always be moving. After 1 minute, lift up the sheet with the tongs and let it drip into the developer tray. Goes into the water rinse. 10 to 20 seconds. Again, agitate the tray a little bit, even though there's a water flow through there. Use the tongs to keep the paper submerged. And then use the tongs so they're in the rinse to move it to the fixer. And there it is in the fixer. Again, set the timer for 1 minute. And same agitation procedure. After the 1 minute, use the tongs that are in the fixer tray, let that drip off, and now we're going to move it into the wash tray. Make sure there's a good flow of water going through the tray, and we're going to leave it in there for 5 minutes until it's completely washed, and then we're going to put it on the drying rack screens out in the outer darkroom. Okay, after 5 minutes in the wash, we're going to remove our proof sheet, place it, let drip off, place it face down on the piece of plexiglass here, and then we're going to take the squeegee and we're going to remove as much moisture as we can from the print so it dries faster and so it's less wrinkly. So that should be sufficient. Now we peel it off and we take it into the outer darkroom to the drying racks. Okay, so our drying rack has little window screens in it that slide out, and you just put your proof sheet face up on the screen, and then it's a good idea to take a paper towel and remove any excess moisture from the surface of the print. This keeps it from having watermarks and dimples. Okay. And we just push that screen back in and then go over to the side of the dryer, and there's a little fan that you can set it just on the fan setting for RC paper, and that print should be dry in about 20 minutes.